Good day, everybody. My name is Paul Harrington. Welcome to this webinar. Today, we're going to look at the different wood species and what to take in consideration when you're designing with each of the different wood species. But before we jump in there, I would like to introduce Jasmine and Samuel. So, Jasmine, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Paul. My name is Jasmine. I've been at Decor since 2012. I designed kitchens for just over 10 years, and now I get to have a lot of fun educating other designers and connecting with dealers.
Perfect. Thanks. Samuel, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Samuel, and I'm right now leading the product development department. I've been with Decor for 16 years now, started 2010 in the specialty department in production, and I filled various roles, but now I'm leading the product development team. Yeah.
That's nice. So today we're just going to have a conversation between Samuel and Jasmine. And as you have questions, you can just pop them in the chats and we'll answer them via the chats. So Jasmine, can you tell us from a design perspective, like why it's important to know the different types of wood species?
For sure. So wood species really matters because it influence more than just color. As we were looking at our slides, it helps drive design direction. So it affects the grain pattern, the texture, how stain appears, overall style direction, and how much variation the kitchen will have. So understanding these differences really helps designers choose materials intentionally for the project. So wood is a natural material. Every tree grows differently, which means variation is normal. Designers should expect color variation, grain variation, mineral streaks, knots, or character marks. It's a living thing. Every tree is different. Everything's going to be different, but the variation is part of what makes it really unique. So setting this expectations early with clients is important. And it's not meant to that's going to look wild. It's just knowing the expectations of what it's going to look like and what to expect from the different species.
Are there any resources for designers?
The nice thing about Decor is we do have a policy online. So this looks a little scary. This is just a quick snapshot of what it looks like. So we at Decor have a policy and a wood characteristics guide. So this is a little snapshot. It shows photos with common characteristics, clear expectations of what's natural and acceptable in each species, and then some photos of examples of the variation, like the mineral streaks, knots, and grain differences. And then also information on how the finish will interact with the wood species. So educating yourself first and then making sure you understand what that looks like, then you can educate your clients about these characteristics. It really helps set clear expectations. With designing, I have found really making sure that you lay out the information to the clients ahead of time really helps things later on so they know what to expect and there's no surprises.
Absolutely. Samuel, can you kind of jump in and talk about solid wood versus veneer and some expectations there?
Veneers and solid woods, they both have a solid wood surface. Obviously, with the veneers, we're using less solid wood because the core is a composite or a particle board, for example. It has pros and cons. It is less price sensitive, so veneers are cheaper because we are using less solid wood. You don't have to glue up all these panels to make that board, right? And still have a solid wood appearance. And because they have that composite core, they're more stable than solid wood. Solid wood likes to expand and contract and warp, and with a veneer we don't have that. It's a more stable panel, and we use it in many products, right? In end panels, in shelves, and all kinds of products where a larger surface is necessary. But it also has different effects on how the finish reacts to it. The solid wood and the veneer can slightly look different in appearance because with the veneer we have so they're usually very selected, and there's some very tight criteria how to select wood for the veneers. And so the appearance on a veneer board versus a solid wood board that we glue up could be different. It also depends where the tree grows and where they get that wood from, right? So there's that. Like so, there's some differences in there, but there, yeah, the veneer has its place for sure. And
Mhm.
so does solid wood.
Absolutely. I think probably the main thing is to take that if you have like your solid pieces next to a veneer piece, you can't expect that those to be the same. They're not. They're from two different. They're going to be from two different woods, like trees, and so then the way that they look and stuff can be different, and then also how the stain would soak into the solid or the veneer could be slightly different as well.
Different too, yeah.
So. Jasmine, can you talk about grain pattern and what to look for that?
Definitely. So grain pattern can really impact design. So having like a tight, consistent grain will definitely look more modern and more minimal. Moderate grain will have more of that transitional flexibility, where the heavy and active grain will look more rustic or traditional. So maybe some examples would be a slab door with a really subtle grain, maybe like white rift oak, could look really clean and architectural, where maybe something like a shaker style or a more decorative door style and have active grain will give you a lot more texture and warmth and movement, but might lean a little bit more transitional or traditional.
Perfect. So now that we've kind of gone high level, I want to kind of jump in more to each of the different wood species. And so, uh, Sam, can you talk about walnut and kind of set the expectations from a manufacturer slash design perspective?
Yeah, sure. Before we start with walnut, maybe I would like to say that all our wood species are hardwoods. We do not have softwoods. It's not hardwoods and softwoods. They differentiate not in the hardness itself, but it's how the tree grows. Softwood has then usually needles, evergreens, right? And hardwoods have leaves that fall off during winter season, and the tree does not grow all year long. And it's a slower growing tree, and that's why they're called hardwoods. But we all our woods are hardwoods and very high quality woods. And but yes, there's differences still in between the species that we do carry. So walnut is a very premium wood. Um, it is very rich in the appearance. It looks very good natural when you just apply a clear coat or some stains that don't change the appearance too much. Maybe to give some more stability in the look, in that appearance, in the variation. The difference between veneer and solid wood in walnut is that the veneer is usually um, more consistent in the colors because of how it's selected. Um, and the solid wood, it can vary quite a bit. Sometimes you get a really light piece and then you get a dark piece. With walnut, that is very much the case. Sometimes it's in one piece of wood where you have the two colors in one slab of wood. It's very natural, and that's what makes walnut. Like the variation, that's to be expected. Um, if you like those tones, you have to expect some of the variety that comes with it, the dark and light sapwood. That's yeah part of that.
Perfect. And Jasmine, can you dive a little bit deeper on the design side of things for walnut?
Yeah, so walnut's definitely really deep and dynamic. So it's kind of got that medium texture, kind of like Sam was saying. There's going to be variation in color with it, and that's the beauty of it. There's a lot of variation. So it's like he's saying, it has a dark brown heartwood with some lighter sapwood contrast. So there's going to be variation across components. There's going to be occasional pin knots, curls, or burls. So definitely referring back to that designer reference guide that I was talking about. But for design using, you can really use it for modern, moody, high contrast spaces. It works really well as a feature. I feel like we are still seeing a lot in design with floating shelves or maybe on like a hood or something like that. I feel like we're still seeing a lot of walnut. So on all these photos that we're going to look at 4 different stains kind of on some samples, as well as a photo of it being used. So here you can see you can still see a lot of the variation. Once you do apply that darker stain, you'll still get a lot of variation, but it's going to be more subdued. This picture was kind of neat to look at because this is a veneer. So this would be a veneer door style. So it's got that veneer skin on it. and it has that variation. And if you look kind of closely, to me, this looks like it's actually grain matched. So again, that's another expectation to set is when you have a lot of grain variation. If you're doing something like a slab door, you are going to expect variation from door front to door front when you're not having stiles and rails breaking that up. So whether you're wanting to maybe set that expectation that there could be a lot of grain variation, and if you're not liking that, it could look different, you could do a grain match. So our door style, which would be a V106B, so that would match throughout the drawer front.
Awesome. And looking at the photos here of the four different finishes, you know, look at the top right one. You can see there's definitely the light and the dark. And again, that's something that would be expected. It's part of the beauty of the walnut with the finish.
It's especially visible when you have joints, like on the mortise and tenon door, where the stile meets the rail, and you have two different slabs of wood with different colors. You would see that definitely, especially when that is paired with a veneer center panel. Sometimes you get those three different shades. So overall, when you look at the entire kitchen, that might just blend in. But if you just look at one door, it could look really, it could be throwing you off, right? Looking at those variations.
Absolutely.
But I'm just going to butt in really quickly. Sorry. I will say on our website, it's nice because you can sort looking at the inspiration photos according to species. So if someone is interested in walnut or has a client who's wanting walnut, you can look at a lot of inspiration photos and see, especially I would say looking at our product, because I feel like different companies will have maybe different grades of wood that they accept.
Yeah.
So looking at what is acceptable for decor and looking at what we sell and just taking a peek of what to expect there.
Absolutely. All right, Samuel, can you talk about clear alder?
Yes, clear alder. It's one of our softer woods. It's not a softwood, but it's a softer wood than, let's say, walnut, or later when we talk about oak or maple. It's a very warm tone wood. It works really nice for stains. The lower hardness means that it can be dented more easily. So the durability of it is not as high as, let's say, a maple or a oak door, but it's a good choice when a softer visual is required. Like I said, for stain, it's a really good color. It really, it's easy to work with. You get consistency, and it in production as well. It machines nicely, efficient efficient wood species to process. Yes, we sometimes even in production get some nicks and dents here and there if we're not careful. So that's one thing with this wood to watch out for. If you need something really durable, maybe alder's not the species to choose, but it is a very nice visual door. So it's, and the price point is also attractive, right? So,
and just because like it has a lower hardness, there's some positive for that, right? You know, I know later on we'll talk about maple. You know, maple's too hard, where we wouldn't add distress in to maple, right? But for clear alder, because it is, it's still a hard wood, but because it's a softer one,
it's formable. Right?
It's something.
We can put in all these dents.
Yeah, we can do the different distress and features to those. So there's pros and cons to those, right? So Jasmine, can you talk a little bit about clear alder?
Mm-hmm. So just like Samuel said, it's very soft and balanced, but you'll still expect a couple small pin knots and burls. I do feel like it is quite, our clear alder is quite clear. And just like he's saying, it takes stain really evenly with that toner support. So you will see in our selection of stains that we have quite a few lighter stains available on clear alder because it does take that. So I feel like I said, I started in 2012. And when I started, it was a lot of red oak and maple was basically what people were doing. People were kind of getting away from cherry at that point. But definitely later on in my design career, it swapped. And I feel like we were seeing a majority of clear alder, I think, with the availability of those lighter stains, which became more popular, and just the overall tone that it did. So it really gives a good balance. So I grabbed again a picture, and you can see we have a variety of stains. So I just grabbed 4. So it stains really nicely. You can see that little bit of variation in there, but it's not nearly as pronounced as something like walnut. So get that little bit of wood variation. It's really beautiful. without it leaning really heavy and looking rustic or traditional. So it is one of those woods that we do our coastal colors on. We do it on most of them, but you can still a bit of the grain variation. So a lot of spectrum as far as light to dark stains that we do. It's really, really pretty. I feel like we've seen it a lot, and we're seeing a lot more in general with design, a lot of wood coming back, and less all painted kitchens. We're seeing more even all stained kitchens. And I feel like we're seeing a lot of that alder. It really hits kind of all those marks, being able to do dark stains, light stains, and just having an overall clean appearance.
I know on occasion a designer will come and ask us if we can paint uh, clear alder or alder, and we actually we won't paint alder, but what we can do is what's called an opaque stain, and it kind of matches or gives you the paint look uh, on alder. So, Samuel, can you talk a little bit about naughty alder?
Yes. The alder tree in general has lots of knots. So when we talk about clear alder, it's selected from the same tree, right? The wood is just chosen um, without the knots and then separated. So we have knotty and clear alder. Um, the knots, there's a tight criteria how large the knots can be and how open they can be and all that. So it's still a high quality board, even though it has knots. Um, and it is, and I'm sure Jasmine will talk about the appearance and the application of it, but it's more rustic than clear alder. The knots are there on purpose. You want them. You want them spread out as evenly as possible to get that look. So we take great care to make sure that we have that the knots like in every piece or item that we sell to make sure that you get that desired look with the knots. Same as clear alder, it's easy to machine, but sometimes those knots can get in the way of the tools. They're harder and they don't have that. It messes with the grain direction and the pattern. But in general, that's good. It's all about character. If you want that character, Naughty Alder is great. Also, a good price point because it's less than clear alder because the boards are selected for clear alder, right? So this is what remains, but it's still a good grade. Like we still make sure that we have a nice grade for that. Like I said, knot sizes and quantities and all that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I know we always make sure that the knots are they're not loose or anything as well. But if you're ordering naughty alder, we know that's what you expect to see. So we kind of
Also, the veneer is matched, so we have naughty veneer to that. Like the holes that the veneer has are filled so that they appear to be black. So, but it's yeah, we also carry the naughty veneer.
yeah. And with that, when you're applying your stain to it, of course, where the knots are, it will be darker compared to the other part where the other part of the alder where you don't see it.
Yeah, stain reacts differently to knots on veneer panels than knots on solid wood because of the depth.
Yeah.
Right. Veneer is very thin, and so it is slightly different, but it's still a good appearance.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jasmine, from a designer's perspective, what do we want to look at for naughty alder?
You bet. So it's definitely more like what Sammy's saying, rustic and character driven. So it's the same base grain as clear alder, but has those prominent knots. So I actually did do it in my own kitchen, and I did what was our briar stain. So it's a very kind of deeper brown, and so you're not seeing as much variation with the knots, but it's still it's very sound. So there's not large knots, but you have to make sure to know the cracks and burls and that strong visual movement. Again, kind of like what you said with that walnut door, looking at one specific door won't necessarily say that your kitchen's going to look like this. So finding some photos online so that you understand the variation of what the knots are there, or if you have a customer who's interested in naughty alder and maybe like a lighter stain that you don't have a sample of, maybe ordering a door sample of that just to kind of show how that stain could interact with the knots. But you don't know how many knots you're going to have on that door style. So, but for design use, really using it for that rustic or farmhouse, a bit of old world, you can add texture and personality. Like we mentioned, we do have distressing on alder, so that would be on clear alder or knotty alder. We have multiple levels of distressing. So we have light and heavy. There's a couple other different options, and then you can mix and match them as well if you're wanting to add any more distressing or make it look more rustic. So again, kind of showing some options of colors. So you can see we do still have that wide variety of the dark to the light, and just making sure those expectations are clear. On the lighter ones that you would likely see the knots more prominent than something with a darker stain. So in this photo is actually the same color I have in my kitchen would be the briar on the knotty alder. So you can see the knots aren't as prominent. You can kind of see them on that top drawer in the photo and the top rail, and then in the middle one kind of in the middle of the center panel by the handle. But to me, that's not quite as noticeable, but it's still really pretty and just adds a little bit of character to it.
Okay, so now we're gonna switch to maple, and so yeah, first let's talk about maple a little bit, Sam.
Maple is one of the harder woods we have. It's even more heavy than alder, for example. A very smooth grain, closed grain, and that's why we also use it for paints, right? Because it's very close, so the surface is very smooth when it's sanded, and it's very durable. That's one of the big pros, right? Like for maple, but the downside for maple is it moves with humidity changes a lot. So more than most would expect, maple is quite vulnerable to humidity changes. So it's the amount that the wood shrinks and expands when it's exposed to the elements, and that could result in changing of dimensions of a panel, or cracking, or in the design of the product, it needs to have some room for expansion, right? If you fill a gap with something, we need to make sure we think about that. So maple is one of the species where you see it the most. Every wood does that in what, like, everything expands with humidity changes, but maple especially need to watch out for that. If you do a project where there will be moisture and humidity changes, maybe maple is not the choice for that.
Mhm.
Maybe you want to go with oak or something else, but otherwise, yes, very durable, very good looking, clean look wood, very popular.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to expand on the environment part, right? Like, depending on where the project's going to be, placed, if it's going to be, say, down in Florida uh, or over in Washington State, or different areas, right? They have different humidity levels and stuff, and so definitely take that into consideration when you're designing your project. I know we touched a little bit on maple and being painted. There's some definitely pros and cons there, but here at Decor, we are a strong proponent in doing high density fiberboard doors for painted doors, HDF. And so can you kind of elaborate a little bit on our fiberboard and why we choose that for painted over, say, painted maple?
Yes, fiberboard is a man-made material, so the benefits with fiberboard are that you the expansion and contraction with humidity changes are the same in all directions of the material. So it's not like wood where it expands across the grain more than along the grain. So that is more predictable, and when you have joints, it's because it expands in all directions the same way. The joints don't seem to separate or crack open, and that's one big benefit. It's because it's a material that is man-made and consists out of lots of little fibers that are held together with glue. It's very consistent. You don't get any surprises with the grain changing, or taking the finish different in different areas because of the hardness that varies slightly. So the fiberboard is very consistent and takes the finish very well. It's still also very hard, durable, and but yeah, definitely has some benefits, especially for the environmental changes. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're doing a paint, we will definitely strongly encourage you to go to our HDF material. Now, we're not saying that that it will never shift or move. It does still expand, so you can still get some hairline cracks or whatnot, but it's less likely to happen with HDF than with maple. And so here at Decor, if you do a paint, we're going to recommend the HDF material. If you do it on maple, then the expectation is that over time it will expand, and you can get joints to crack open and whatnot, and those might not necessarily be covered under warranty. So just something to take in consideration when you're choosing your paint. Now, Jasmine, can you talk more about maple and from design perspective of maple?
Mhm. So just like Samuel said, reiterating that it's very smooth and controlled. So it's got a very fine, tight grain pattern. When we see some pictures of stains, you're not seeing tons of variation or graining. So it's got that really creamy white undertone. So very subtle variation. It's the most consistent looking as far as natural wood goes. So there, but what to expect is there's still going to be some mineral streaks, pin knots, bird eye, crossbars. Again, those kind of words, they might not mean a lot to the everyday person, but once you start studying that designer reference guide and seeing what they all mean, and that way you can know for yourself as a designer, you can know what to expect and put those expectations. Again, it's such a big part of designing is letting people know those expectations, and so that there's no surprises. So you'll see a lot of it being used more for modern or transitional spaces. You're not really seeing it as much for a traditional space, maybe if there's some glazing or something like that. But here's some pictures and some stains. So again, there is a lot of variation in stain with maple that we do. And you can really see on those light colors that you're not seeing a lot of grain variation, especially when we're talking in comparison to walnut. Alder is kind of in that middle section. So, but the maple, it can slightly appear a little bit more blotchy because of it having such a tight grain. So you might have that little bit of a blotchiness look to it where alder might look a little bit more uniform. So again, looking at door samples, looking at like overall photos and what to expect. But I do feel like we're going a little bit away from the maple and going more into the alder. But now that we're able to do nice light stains on maple, that might be coming back a bit more.
Um, and just I like the picture here of this vanity, right? Like if you were to just take the drawer front, either one of the drawer fronts, and just looked at it by itself, and then you took the door next to it, like those look too different. They look too different, but and so just setting the expectation that you shouldn't expect this, like it can't be consistent across the board. The grain is going to pull that stain differently from piece to piece, right? And so
yeah, sorry. And even kind of like what Samuel is saying, this door style in particular, it's a veneer door style and it's got a solid wood frame. So like you're saying, sometimes stain on a veneer can take a little differently than a solid wood. So there could be a slight variation when you have a door style like this that has veneer with a solid wood, or like a door style that has a ply panel in the center, which is that veneer, and then you're surrounding it with solid wood. So just, we do our best. We have really great finishes as far as putting those toners and those different levels of stain on there, but that there could be a slight variation.
Absolutely.
yeah, Sam, why don't you talk a little bit about cherry?
Cherry is a very nice wood as well. It is very refined and very beautiful. Cherry has very rich tones. Like the natural finish is very, very rich. It's but the cherry darkens over time, so the wood darkens when exposed to light. So that's something to keep in mind, that the finish of the kitchen might change slightly with time. It is in production. The machines performs really good, good stability, but color matching is a little bit trickier with cherry. You have to pay more attention. It's again, why would you choose solid wood over something synthetic or man-made? It's because of the character. It's because of what you expect from wood to be. Cherry is a good example, when that natural look and the aging process of the solid wood, if it's something that is really desired, and it is very beautiful, but you have to set your expectations correctly, right? Over time, it might change, but it's part of the story. It's part of what you want. Then this is a great choice.
Absolutely. I love how cherry looks. I like how it ages and it kind of shifts over time. But, like you said, if you have to take in consideration is where this going to be. If you have some fronts that are open to the natural sunlight, those fronts are going to age differently than the ones that aren't exposed to the sunlight. So just something to take in consideration.
Or if you need to replace a front at one point, right? It will be tricky to match, and then over time it might change again.
Yep. So. Exactly. Anytime you have to replace a front, doesn't matter when you replace it. If you replace it, right when it was installed, or if you replace it, a year from when it was installed. Those fronts, once you get the replacement fronts, those fronts are going to age differently than the original. So that's another thing to take in consideration when you're doing natural wood. So Jasmine, can you talk a little bit about the design with cherry?
I'm also just going to put in, as a designer, talking about the aging is really making sure your samples are up to date, because we're talking about the expectations. So having your samples be up to date and all of them have an expiry date on them, then they'll know what to expect when they see it. But with cherry, actually, it was neat because we'd often keep a couple old samples of something like cherry that ages. And it was really neat to see over time. We had a couple of cherry natural samples, which would be one that you would see the aging the most. So it was kind of neat to see over time. So sometimes, even though it's nice to hold on to a couple of them to show those expectations, but I feel like cherry is a really big one to explain how it's going to change over time. So again, it's very warm and it's evolving. I feel like when I first started at Decor, it was kind of at the end where everyone wanted a cherry kitchen. So Alder does give kind of a similar look without that, but it does have that more rich and reddish brown tone. So it's that heartwood. It does have a high color variation, so it's going to have some of those gum spots and dark streets. But really, like we've been really hitting home here, it's going to darken over time. It's going to age and change with light exposure. So really, cherry, we're seeing a lot more of that very traditional. It has maybe some elevated transitional design. So ideal with really warm and richness are the goal. So best when variations embraced as part of the look. And again, with that aging. So here's some examples. So again, we do offer multiple kinds of stains on there. We do some of the coastal stains, which have more of a color to them, but you can see there's not tons on these little samples of variation. So selling a kitchen, I wouldn't ever do with a small sample. Door samples are really, really good to get. But you can see that picture of what it looks like. So even those coastal colors, which is shown in this picture here, look really beautiful with that little bit of that cherry grain underneath.
I have some designers, or I've gotten questions over the years working with different designers, is they know about the natural lighting and stuff, but they don't always take in consideration the lights, light from the actual, like a pendant or light, and that can also have an effect on the aging process a little bit too. So it's both natural and lighting from a light source. So. Okay, Sam, let's talk about white ripped oak.
Special wood species we carry. It's all from white oak. But what makes it white rift oak is the cut, the special way it gets cut. The tree gets cut in a certain way, which results in the grain pattern to be very linear, very straight, and controlled. But it is not the most efficient way to cut a tree. So it is very selective and very controlled. So there's some waste with that. So that's why a rift cut wood is always a little more expensive than a regular cut wood. But it gives you that appearance that you're looking for if you want something very very controlled and very straight. There's also limited length available with this, because of the tree and because of how it's cut. But it's very stable. A stable wood. Oak in general is very stable, predictable. It's very good with stains. Takes stains very well. With rift oak, same as with the red oak, the grain is not closed. It's more open, more porous, and you can see that character on the finish, on the reflections. If the light reflects off of your door, you can see the grain patterns. Same as the red oak, the regular cut oak, and it's also good with humidity in places where there's humidity changes, or in general more humid. Oak is a great choice.
Okay, so Jasmine, let's talk about the design characteristics of white rift oak.
It's also just, again, been really interesting to see over the years of designing or being in the design world. Like I said, it was often kind of cherry was at its end of the life cycle, I would say, when I started, at least here in southern Manitoba. Went to maple and like red oak kind of, and it's really shifted to that alder and white rift oak. So they're both really do well with accepting light stains, looking really linear and modern. So it's a really straight, consistent grain pattern. So you're not going to have a lot of those cathedral arches. It's going to be really predictable in how it looks. So it really does take those light to medium brown stains really well. It has that more of that neutral and olive undertone. Kind of, again, what's really popular now. We're seeing a lot of those light stain colors being trending right now. So you can still expect some color variation depending on the stain. So it is nice to maybe have 2 door samples to kind of look at, and looking at photos, again, look at photos of our product to see our quality of wood. But it will still, even though it's a tight grain, you'll still see a strong linear grain, especially like Samuel's saying, like when the light reflects off there. So really seeing it with that more modern, we're seeing it a lot with that kind of more Scandinavian inspired kitchen. So it's really good for large continuous applications. Like we've seen a lot of it. So again, some photos here. You can really see on that top left, that light stain. You can really see the grain pattern in there. But like it said, it's really tight. It's close together. From far away, it gives a really uniform look. It's really, really pretty. We're seeing a lot of it coming through. So definitely more modern. We're seeing, again, really looking at those expectations of when you're mixing door styles that might have veneer with solid in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm glad you brought up the veneer. Like, if you're doing veneer, again, because of the grain is so tight, I would definitely do the V106B to get that grain matching within the cabinet. It would definitely give you a nice, a better look, I think.
Especially with the design style with this, right? Yeah.
All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about white rift oak, let's jump to red oak. So Samuel, can you talk about red oak?
Yes. So red oak is a different wood species than white oak by the tree itself as well, not just the cutting pattern. So it has different color tones in the wood. Like the name says, it's more reddish undertones, which has a big impact on the stains as well that we can use, or the finish that results out of applying the same stain. Let's say on the white oak versus a red oak is different. The wood grain is different. You get it's not as linear as the rift cut. You have variety in that in the grain patterns. and but it's more cost effective because it's a more efficient way to cut a tree um, and take stain well. It's good with humidity changes, moisture, environment. Like it's durable. Um, it's a hardwood. It's like a nice hardwood species, um, and good availability. Length options are better, um, and even yeah, it's not as when we have select wood selected. There's different criteria when we get it from the mill, right? And red oak is a little more forgiving with that regular cut, um, and it works nice. Just when you buy a too low of a grade, you get more defects in the wood, and that's what we don't want. So it's still a high grade, but it's more forgiving that way. Um, so it's a cost effective. It's a nice cost and performance balance.
Okay, Jasmine, let's talk about the design part of it.
So definitely more bold and traditional. So it has that open green, but has a really strong cathedral pattern. So again, looking at door samples, definitely look at multiple door samples if you can, looking at photos. So that more pink, reddish undertone, very highly visible green texture. That's what people, I think when people think of oak, that's kind of their first mind, where their mind goes to is there are those cathedral patterns. So the green will become more pronounced with the stain. So has those pin knots, some mineral streaks, natural variation. It can be a little bit more uniform, but it will still have a lot of those active green cathedral arches. So definitely seeing a lot more traditional and transitional spaces. But I feel like we're seeing a lot of that richness coming back. Like I feel like those design cycles are getting a little shorter. That now we're kind of going back into those more rich tones, kind of like that top right photo. So like or top right stain option. So we're still seeing a lot of that top left, that light stain. I think Decor's done a really good job of getting light stains on the red oak now. I feel like we've done a really good job in achieving kind of that white oak look with our red oak. But you can still see the green direction through that quite easily. So, and again, taking that different look on veneer and versus a slab door. So I actually really love this picture. The designer, I think, did such a neat job using red oak, which is more traditional to me, and finding a way to making it look a bit more modern. So like you're not stuck in a box by the species you have. It can kind of dictate the look that you'll have, but you can obviously be creative with it. So that photo I think is a really neat way that this designer uses slab door style with our red oak and with the stain color. It looks really modern, but it still looks really warm. I think adding that grain in this modern sample really warms it up. It's just really pretty. They did such a good job.
I want to say thanks for going through the different species and stuff. Um, we throughout we've hinted at the stain and talk a little bit about light stain and dark stain. And so I'm just curious about what to expect uh, with dark or light stain and how does that play from both like from a manufacturer standpoint, but then also from a design standpoint.
So from the design standpoint, really, I feel like if you're looking at stain options, it is nice to look at, in general, looking at multiple samples if you can, looking at multiple door styles, and understanding how the grain will show through. Like this image that we have here is such a good sample of showing how much of that grain is going to poke through and setting those expectations for your clients and having them bringing in sample photos of what they're looking for because they might be looking at something like melamine and not even realizing it and expecting this really, really clear, clean, consistent look, but really kind of sending that message. And again, we've said that word expectation many times, but that's so important to set that expectation of how the grain will react with the wood. So, and you don't want your clients to come back and say, well, I didn't know that. So I definitely feel like with lighter stains, you're going to see more of the grain poke through. I feel like that's kind of a common theme there, but you'll still see it a little bit on the dark stains. Like I feel like that medium stain on the top right is a good example that you're still going to see that the green peeking through.
In addition to that, um, the light stains are harder to apply in manufacturing. we apply toner and stains manually here at Decor. It's not a spray stain; it's a wipe stain. So it's lots of manual process. And with the light toners, especially with the Urban collection that we have, the toners are so light that it's hard to see what you're applying. Like when you spray the wood, it's hard to see that you're applying something. And the operators have to really rely on muscle memory, on their patterns, on their consistency, on their speed. And they're basically doing it blind when they apply the toner, but the toner has a big impact later how the stain reacts. And so that's why for us, it's a challenge. It was a challenge. It's still a challenge to do light stains, but we understand the market wants those colors, those tones. It's just a challenge bigger than a medium or dark stain for sure. And yeah, because of the how the stain is so light, the natural wood characteristics are amplified. And if the wood is by nature already has variation in the wood, sapwood versus the darker wood, it will show more with the light stains. It's not as opaque. It doesn't cover or it doesn't equal out the differences as much as a darker stained wood.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking about setting those the expectations, right? Like if a client or designer is choosing a lighter stain, we always have to remember that, at the end of the day, this is wood. It's not man-made, right? And so no two pieces are made from the same tree. You're gonna have different, even within just the wood itself, you'll have light and dark within the different species. So then when you add a light stain to it, it's going to apply differently than when you add a dark stain to it. So thanks for that. Jasmine, can you talk about, I know throughout we've also talked about material availability and how that comes into play in setting expectations there?
You bet. So again, at Decor, we have a lot of resources for designers. So this is something on our university. So you can see this little note here. So it's showing you, this would be if you're looking at a molding chart. So I always, as a designer, like to kind of have this in my pocket when I was learning. And this kind of shows the different species and the lengths available. So these would be there, for example, the 8-foot or the 12-foot moldings. So you can see like knotty alder, and we have clear alder, and walnut and white rift oak don't come in 12-foot lengths. So you have to really think about that, because that will impact if you're doing tall cabinetry. And I feel like I don't feel like we're seeing as many houses with 8-foot ceilings anymore. I feel like almost 9-foot is almost the normal. And now I feel like we're starting to see 10-foot ceilings become more normal. So that really impacts if you're having to have cabinetry that goes quite tall, that goes past that 8-foot mark. So when you're using things like walnut or white rift oak, that really can create some challenges, and you have to get expectations and grain matching and seam placement. So that'll really affect how that is. So really looking at the height of their ceilings is really important, and the look that they're going for. And then again, if they're wanting that light color, how can you achieve that? Or if they like a certain species, how can you achieve that? And really putting that out there that we are going to have seams.
Yeah. Is there anything else from a design perspective you want to highlight as far as material availability?
So I just really feel like it's important to understand, like looking at that ceiling height. That's just because people don't necessarily want to see seams. Like you see all these pictures on Pinterest or online, and everything looks perfect, right? But there's things that people would have to work around. So this is a really good scenario done by one of our designers. So again, I'm talking about how ceilings, I think, are getting taller and taller. And I feel like we're still doing cabinetry to the ceiling. So this is one where they had a 10-foot ceiling. So this was done in white rift oak, which on our chart that we saw before doesn't come in 12-foot length. So like this overall cabinetry height would probably be, so we're at 120 inches. I have to do like mental math. You're probably looking at like 115 inches. So that's more than 8 feet, obviously. So this one, what they ended up doing, so their overall cabinet height was 114 inches, and our max height for material is 96. So what did they do here? So again, also they did decorative panels. So you can see on the left-hand side of our image, kind of tucked behind the light, there's 2 plant-on panels. So that's covering a seam. And then those cabinets themselves are also stacked. Maybe even not necessarily always for material availability, also for installation delivery considerations, what's going to be easy to bring into the space. But this designer did a really good job with the homeowner that they lined everything up with their decorative panels. So you're not really thinking, oh, there's a seam there. As a design, as someone who walks in the home, you're not going to see that seam. So they did a really, really good job of that. And then on the right-hand side, how it worked out, you can't see the front of the image, but they have like a lower, like a base decorative panel, and then they have a tall decorative panel. But there are seams there, but they're done really intentionally and how to make that work. But that might not have been as easy if they would have had a veneer panel for a side, or if they just wanted finished end. So this worked out really well that they did a decorative end panel. And then another quick design scenario. So we talked about door styles before. So V106 is a veneer slab door, and that comes with vertical grain, but we're still seeing some horizontal grain patterns on doors. So when you have horizontal grain, your material size isn't the same, right? Because you have to flip it on the side. So sometimes it's only 48 or 60 inches. So you have like even these cabinets that are sitting on the countertop, they might be over what the material availability is. So in this space, what they ended up doing is they just did a vertical column or vertical end panel, and that's okay. So again, making sure people sometimes have to make that choice. Do they want a seam with a horizontal door style, or do they want vertical ends? So it's those little things, like if they're really set on horizontal door style, a horizontal grain pattern, and looking at kind of the overall height of things and how you're going to finish sides.
Now that we've gone through, the different wood species, we've talked about, the grain, the colors, the material availability. What are the key takeaways that you want everyone to leave with? And I'll have both of y'all answer this question, but I'll start with you, Jasmine.
So again, not on our slides here, but what's kind of been the main thing that we've been talking about today is setting those expectations. So really understand that natural variation yourself and make sure that you are educating the homeowner as well. So really consider that the grain pattern and texture and the color variation and how it can look overall, and how things like your slab door styles or solid door styles, or if you have a mixture of both, what that looks like, and for the color variation and how the stain will take there. So really make sure to pair that right species with your design style, and reviewing samples. Samples are so important to look at. I always like to look at multiple samples or multiple door styles or pictures online. Even though sometimes pictures online, they're edited, so that might not always be the best, but really looking at samples and really even looking at them in different light as well, and how that stain color can look different in different lighting, as far as like showroom lighting versus natural lighting versus at your own home. So I feel like education is the biggest part, and setting those expectations early on and looking at their pictures and what they like.
Yes, I would reiterate, no two pieces of wood are the same, and a challenge, but at the same time, that's also beauty, and it's what you want. If consistency is very important for that design, then maybe um, go for something man-made like a TFL. But if you want that wood characteristics, expect some variation, expect some differences from door to door, from front to front, finish to finish. When choosing a material for your project, it's not just about the color, it's also about material availability, it's about hardness, durability, finishing options like a distressing and so on. Just consider all these things when choosing something for your design. Is it the best fit for my client, or what they need, what they want, the humidity, the environment, all that, right? So
Absolutely. Thank you all both. I will say some key takeaways is, you know what the characteristics are of each species. And then I want to reiterate what Sam said, is that no two pieces of the wood will be the same. So setting that expectation there. And if the client really wants that consistency, going to that man-made product like our TFL, which you can get in the Zona Vida line. And, even though we've talked about veneer. Veneer, the very outer layer, that veneer piece is a wood as well, right? And so sometimes we forget that, and we think we treat veneer almost as if it's a TFL, but it's not. It's a wood piece. So, but thank you all for going through this and explaining in all the details here. Thank you all for watching, and if you got any questions, you can drop them in the chats, and we'll answer those via the chat. Otherwise, we'll see you next time, and have a good day.